the problem in DRC Congo is part of what we call a externalization of an internal conflict, or what we call regionalization of a national conflict. And it has historical roots that go back to the Cold War. This is not the first mission. There was a mission there 1960. In fact, one of the first 60 to 65, one of the earliest missions, UN missions after Kashmir and after Lebanon and a few others, was actually Congo. It's one of the earliest. And there was a very big contingent of troops there, multinational those years, because of problems associated with tensions that had to do with the Cold War. There was a rebellion there. And some of these groups that you see today as rebel groups and so on, what we call armed militia or armed non-state actors or armed non-state groups, they go back to the 60s, the 70s. There were groups there called Vasimba, Mai Mai, and those Mai Mai are still there.
They have they
yes.
believe in spiritual.
Yes, spiritual
powers.
So issues,
right.
yeah.
Right.
There was a lady there called Mama Marie Onema.
Right.
There was Professor Wamba Diawamba. The late President Loro Kabila himself. Those people were in various splinter groups those days, in Katanga, in Kananga, all the way to the eastern part. So these are issues that have evolved over time, and they have sucked in the rest of the regional countries. Now, what happened in 1965, 66, those years, Colonel Joseph Mobutu, he was called Mobutu Sese Seko, he was supported by Western powers, especially those countries that were at that time supporting the West in the Cold War. And so he managed to stay on until the Cold War forces could not support those issues, and his regime collapsed sometime in 1996 when Loro Kabila came in. And when Loro Kabila came in, he was with rebel groups from all over the place. And when they got in, they could not, there was a power vacuum, and they could not manage properly. There were issues, and fighting became intense. And the conflict was very bad, 1997, 1998. And so by 1999, there was need to bring in a UN mission. And that mission was called United Nations Organization Mission in the Democratic Republic of Congo. It was MONUC. Then it stayed on until 2010, roundabout. And because now things had stabilized, because the first election, Zainab, since 1960, 61 and so on, was in 2006. You can imagine. And President Mobutu ruled with an iron fist. It worked, but there were other issues. There were a lot of disgruntled groups. There were always rebel groups all over the place, but they were in the periphery. And so some bad things happened. There was a genocide in Rwanda. There was fighting in Burundi. There was war in Central African Republic. There was war in Sudan because of South Sudan, North-South and all that. And all these things were felt in the Democratic Republic of Congo. And so there were rebel groups from Uganda that were inside the Democratic Republic of Congo. And because it's a big country, it's a big, beautiful country with jungles and forests and villages all the place, sometimes it becomes a very good place for cover for some of these groups. So local people sometimes also would get sucked in and they start their own militias. Then you have what you call private militaries, kind of, you know, the kind of thing you call like mercenaries, people who just come around, they are hired by various interested parties to enforce security and such things. And so it became very complicated. And so in 2010, there was a United Nations resolution, I think it was 1925, that set up, that transformed that mission into a stabilization mission, sort of to oversee the transition. It was called MONUSCO. So from MONUC, it was renamed MONUSCO, Stabilization, United Nations Organization Stabilization Mission in DRC. And so that is how we've ended up with all these groups now.
Because we're talking about what?
56 of, yes.
More than 120 I was reading?
Yes, you have small ones. Right. Those ones, those Mai. You have Mai Yanganga, Mai Kutumba, Mai Kutumba. You have all manner of Mai down there. Then you have a group that is a rebel group that has been, you know, eyeing the southeastern part, southwestern sort of parts of Uganda. It's called ADF, Allied Democratic Forces. And then international terror groups, Zainab, that ISIS, Daesh, Dawla Islamiyya fi al-Iraq wa al-Sham, that's what we call it. This one, when it was defeated, especially in the Middle East because of the fighting there in Syria and so on, they started to have these people escaping to start small cells in these parts. And now they have a group there. Do you know what it calls itself? It calls itself Medina e Tawhid wa Mujahideen. You know what it means? It means city of monotheism and holy warriors. Now, it sounds like a good thing, but they are bad people. They are terrorists. They go to, they have staged attacks inside Kampala. And so President Museveni deployed General Muhanga to lead the troops that went into those parts of DRC, Eastern DRC. Then, going back to the Rwanda genocide, there's a group there, FLDR. And these ones are people who had been involved in the genocide, and they crossed into DRC.
All right.
And destabilizing there. Then M23, this M23, is yet another one formed locally there by groups that are disgruntled also, that, and so on. Now, what happens with a country when it's gone through all this? You form what we call ungoverned spaces. And these ungoverned spaces, they are sort of pockets of vacuum spaces of places where government is not in good control. And so these negative forces occupy these places, and they sort of become law unto themselves.
So this is where they start, the DRC, you know, finds itself?
Yeah, and they start...
This is the space within which it cannot be able to govern the situation.
Exactly. So they destabilize a country.
Okay.
They harm women and children down there in Goma. And Goma is such a very beautiful place, and with a population of over 1 million people, a very vibrant place. The East African economy put together, like what Professor was saying, our market force is almost 550 million people. If we do that, if we stabilize that block, our EAC block, with these 7 countries now, we are going to be doing very well. And that is what Kenya is going to do there.
Okay.